wishes to speak and offer public comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. As a reminder, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per individual. So please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Liz Watson. I live at 211 Science Street. I've been a Naugatuck resident for 37 years. I've raised 3 children here, 2 graduating from high school, 1 senior graduating this year. I am here to discuss why we are discriminating against our children who decided not to get a vaccination. As we know, either vaccinated or unvaccinated, COVID does not discriminate. It is unfair, and the rules, the minute the Department of Public Health decided that this was a rule, we all should have stood up and stood against it, because this is setting up our children for something that we do not want. My son is healthy. We have to stay home last week for no reason at all. So the vaccinated student can go back to school around someone COVID positive, and then they can go back to school with their symptoms. So should an unvaccinated student be allowed to do the same thing? It is our constitutional right and our God-given right. And I hope and pray that we all come together and decide that together we can take care of this and let our children go to school regardless of vaccination status. We should not come out of school when they're not sick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Couldn't hear me? Oh.
If any other member of the public has public comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
You can hear me? Children, one has already graduated in 2017. My son Joseph is currently a junior in high school. I too also need to state that we've had some issues with discrimination. My son has not been vaccinated, but he has had COVID, so he is naturally immune. I'm a little upset that that natural immunity is not. We do have a virus that is ever evolving, and I feel at this point in time we need to evolve with it. But more importantly, I mean, if every student is being affected by this from a psychological standpoint, which I do think that we have enough evidence now that science has dictated that we have a huge problem with psychological issues with our children due to the pandemic. And obviously, you have been put before something that is never been done. This is unprecedented in our time. I understand that, I recognize that. But we have to do some critical thinking, and I feel like that critical thinking has been left behind these days. My son is on an IEP, okay, and I can't even begin to tell you guys, my heart is pierced right now. He was on the honor roll, and he was forced to stay home, and he was not sick because he was simply near somebody that was potentially infected. Never displayed not one symptom. And guess what? Now he's failing several subjects. But I want to ask every one of you, I'm sure every one of you have a child that's either currently in the system or has been. How do I tell my son, I'm so sorry, son, you failed because they wouldn't allow you in school because they saw you as a threat? How do I define that for my son when he had no symptoms at all? And now, on an IEP, right, for him to get on the honor roll, do you have any idea the joy that gave me, the joy it gave him, considering he's never made the honor roll in his entire 17 years of existence? And now he's failing, and he looks at me and he says, Mom, what is the point? What do I say to my son at that point? Because he's got a valid question. He says, I work hard, I strive, and because I'm at risk, because I'm not vaccinated, I have to sit home when I'm not sick. So my question is, are we really doing justice for our children here? This is a pandemic, like she said, it doesn't discriminate. But it also, the children have a 99.997 chance of survival. Teachers are vaccinated. What is the problem? Really, at the end of the day, what is the problem? And I understand that I work in the healthcare industry too. I understand this is something we've never seen. And I am so sorry that all of you have had to do this as well. But this is my child that I have to try to explain. What do I say to him? Could somebody please tell me, what do I say to my son? when he no longer sees school as important because he gets kicked down every time he's around someone exposed that is explosive. I appreciate everyone listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else has public comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, good evening. My name is Craig Rakowski. I'm a father of four. I have 3 kids currently in the school system. I have a high schooler who has an IEP, who's been dinged a few times because he was close contact with a suspected person. This, in theory, doesn't work because what do kids do before school? What do kids do after school? What do kids do on the weekends? Nobody knows. Kids are kids. They want to live. They want to have fun. They want to play. They have a right to an education. For them to be dinged because of potential of someone could be sick, let's use common sense. If someone is sick, has a fever, they stay home. When are we going to start thinking and worry about our kids? It's about our kids' future. They're being smacked down for no reason. When are we going to wake up and see that their future is kind of wishy-washy, and we really need to get behind them and care for them? He was once an honor student. Now he's struggling and failing many classes. People, please, let's have compassion heart for these kids. They need our help. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else has public comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. And one last call for public comment.
Hi, my name is Amy Bosco. I am not currently living in this town, but I am alumni of this school. When we were Greyhound, 1986, graduated National Honor Society. I can give you my email address. Is that okay? So I was led and coached and guided by a stellar administration from superintendent through to the teachers. We even had awesome guidance counselors, the kind that love their jobs and love all the children equally. Rich, poor, gifted, ordinary, sick, and healthy. And I don't ever remember anyone being treated differently or having different rules. I'm quoting from a person who calls himself Spartacus. He wishes to remain anonymous. Our mental and physical health have suffered immensely over the course of the last year and a half. We have felt this thing of isolation, lockdown, masking, quarantines, and other completely nonsensical acts of healthcare theater that have done absolutely nothing to protect the health and or well-being of the public from this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. End quote. I call it the pandemic. I highly recommend everyone read the rest of the resource-filled article. I have the link. I'm quoting from a book called Love is the Strongest Force. Sometimes life deals us a bad hand. The cards, all we can do is play it. She had a comment. Watching my fellow Americans injecting this poison into their bodies under a corrupt administration with the EUA, knowing that they are indeed the studies is not the right thing. I quote, it is more important to do the right thing than it is to do things right. Peter Duncan. You could all agree or disagree, but discrimination and segregation and mandates of this nature are not right. Even though I had great grandparents that raised me, awesome teachers and professors, I will never forget who my true guide is, God. And I'm reading from Psalms 41, verses 1 to 3. Blessed are those who have regard for the weak. The Lord delivers them in times of trouble. The Lord protects and preserves them. They are counted among the blessed in the land. He does not give them over to the desires of his foes. The Lord sustains them on their sick beds and restores them from their bed of illness. I also have, I don't know if there's any teachers here that feel the same way that I do and don't agree with these mandates. I have links to attorneys and phone numbers. Let me know if you have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If anyone else has public comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. And one last time, call for public comment. Seeing none, we'll then move into the superintendent's report. I'll turn it over to Superintendent Montini and Mr. Harris.
I'm happy to introduce you all, of course, to Mr. Harris, High School Principal, who will provide an update to the board in regards to NHS this year, the strategic plan, some academics, social emotional, etc. Mr. Harris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Montini. Thank you, members of the board, for inviting me tonight. I'm excited to be here. I want to take some time to give you an update on the high school strategy related to the superintendent's first two priorities, the strategic plan for the year, academic excellence, and social emotional health and school culture. If we go to the first slide. So we'll talk a little bit about our focus with teachers on establishing learning partnerships with students. We'll talk about how we're implementing the district's acceleration strategy at the high school, how we're learning from our positive deviants, those teachers who are doing uniquely impressive things with very different groups. And we'll talk in terms of culture and climate about social emotional learning and how we're implementing that, ways in which we are listening and incorporating student voice, and some of our efforts to restore that Greyhound pride that was lost after what was honestly a difficult year last year. To kind of segue into that, I want to highlight and celebrate that the state released our preliminary graduation rates for the class of 2021. It sits at 90.8%. That's a 3.7% bump from last year and the highest rate we've had since 2009. And I credit that to our teachers' efforts to build relationships with kids throughout all the ups and downs of last year, through hybrid learning, remote learning, that period that we were closed. Our teachers put their relationships with kids at the forefront. And so our strategies this year, our efforts this year are building on that foundation. So when I talk about learning partnerships, our faculty engaged in a book study this fall to take their assets in building relationships with kids to the next level, and ensuring that those relationships resulted in academic progress and academic growth. Our teachers throughout the fall focused on building into each lesson opportunities to build rapport with culturally and linguistically diverse sets of learners, leveraging that rapport to establish learning alliances. And by that, we are talking about opportunities to assess, give feedback, and to kind of be shoulder to shoulder with each learner as they grow academically. And then finally, opportunities in each lesson for students to establish an academic mindset, a growth mindset, a belief that their effort as independent learners would result in growth in their skills and capabilities. So those learning partnerships fold into our expectations for every lesson. We've taken the acceleration strategies that the district has laid out and tried to build teachers' capacity to ensure that in every lesson there are some common experiences that every student has. That includes every student knowing what they're learning and why they're learning it, how it's related to their broader educational context or real-world context. Each student should be engaged in a task in which their thinking is made visible to the teacher. Teachers should be assessing every student in every lesson, providing actionable, high-quality feedback, having those interactions that build and reinforce the learning partnership, and ensuring that every student can access those lessons and those tasks through scaffolds and modifications. So we're taking the district's acceleration strategies and trying to translate those for teachers into, what are the outcomes that each student should have every lesson, every day. And then on top of that, we have been making an effort this year to learn from our positive deviants, our teachers who they're doing something really right and their students are having incredible outcomes. So a few data points that we've celebrated throughout the year and tried to learn from. In grade 11, our on-track rates for students with IEPs exceed the on-track rates for students without by a fairly significant margin. So we're trying to learn from grade 11 what they're doing well in terms of accommodations and modifications. Our Algebra 2 team, 100% of our English learners are passing Algebra 2. In grade 9, there's almost no gap in on-track rates between Black and Latino students and their white peers. And biology has demonstrated that no matter where a student's at, they're able to apply themselves, apply that growth mindset, and recover from failures. So we have been engaging teachers in learning walks, student shadow days, and a lot of coaching conversations to try to learn from their colleagues about what's working well. For social emotional learning, we have been continuing to implement the ruler curriculum in weekly advisory lessons. I put learning partnerships at the heart of social emotional learning as well. Again, we want every student having a relationship with every teacher. Our counselors and social workers have been engaging in training for dialectical behavioral therapy. We have administered the DESA assessment this fall and are using that data to drive our planning for advisory lessons. We've been expanding and deepening our community partnerships. Naugatuck Youth Services has been a fantastic partner coming in to offer drug and vaping prevention services. We've been partnering with Wellmore so that we have counselors in the building for students experiencing loss and grief. We have just begun working with community mental health associates to help students transition back to school, whether it's after a quarantine, a sickness, or a disciplinary issue. And I just want to celebrate that in many ways, the life of a high school is coming back, right? So again, last year, I think one of the most difficult things for students was that high school didn't feel like high school, right? We weren't having homecoming dances and pep rallies. Nothing looked normal, and we've seen a lot of return to the life of a student this year, right? Our fall athletic season was fantastic, culminated in that great win against Ansonia. But our students were so excited to be able to have the pep rally before Thanksgiving and go to the Friday night games. We had a senior sunrise at the beginning of the year for the seniors to come back together and kick off what has hopefully been a fantastic year for them so far. We've had our concerts, we've had our spirit days, we've had our door decorating and our alumni panels. And all of the academic stuff aside and all the stuff that our teachers are doing aside, I'm most thankful that high school looks a lot more like high school this year for our kids. I want to close, just want to share a few data points for the year so far with you. Our on-track rates for grade 9 are at 72% right now, so that's up 12% from last year. Still a bit down from the 1920 school year at this time, but I think we're making growth there. 89% of our seniors are on track to graduate. 32% of them have applied to at least one college at this point, and that's up really significantly from the past few years. And half of our seniors so far have completed the bachelor. So in terms of academics, our students continue to make progress and be on track. And in terms of culture and climate, on the last slide, our discipline referrals per month, I didn't include 2021 because there was no discipline last year because half the kids weren't in school. But from 1920 and 1819, we've seen a decline in discipline referrals every month. And in terms of that bottom chart should say referrals per student, we see 92% of our students with no referrals or just one. That's the highest rate since we started tracking the data. And the number of students with 2 to 5 referrals or 6+ referrals has declined. I won't lie and say that we don't have students who demonstrate significant needs coming back from the pandemic. That's why we've been doing so much work around social emotional learning and with community partners. But by and large, we've seen an improvement in our school culture just by looking at this. So those are my slides. I'm happy to take any questions or for anything else I can.
Mr. Murphy?
Evening, Mr. Harris. On slide 5, you talked about some of the positive numbers that we could talk about in your school. And while you mentioned academics quite a few times, which I was pleased to hear, as I mentioned in committee the other night, I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. So can you talk about like total students? Because it's great to see that English learners, 100% are passing Algebra 2. But I was thinking about your school, knowing your presentation was coming the other day. And I know once upon a time, not too long before COVID, only 1 in 5 students was passing the SATs for math, only 2 in 5 for the English side of the SATs. So what does that look like today for the entire school, not just a small percentage of students?
Yeah, so those numbers are frankly where they were. I mean, I'd be able to say the same numbers, right? About 20% in math, 40% in ELA. But I think that by learning from these positive outliers, by continuing to deepen relationships with students, we'll continue to see those numbers grow. With math especially, that team has been working closely with folks from ACES in learning and implementing the illustrative math curriculum that offers students a much more inclusive math experience where they are invited to engage with problems, think critically, and go far beyond sort of the memorization and repetition of procedure. So, both Ms. Messenger and I are really invested in that curriculum. We have high hopes for it translating into the improved scores that I think you're asking about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Harris? Thank you very much, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
That then brings us into our monthly reports. And our first report is our student rep report. But before I turn it over to Tenzin and Josephine, I just want to take a minute to congratulate Tenzin and ask that we all give him a round of applause and congratulations on his acceptance to Yale. We're extremely proud of you, and we know that you will make us proud as a Naugatuck alum.
Thank you. Okay, I will start. Sorry. So students have returned to school after winter break and are re-entering the academic setting. Oh, sorry.
We want to hear you besides see you.
Students have returned to school after winter break and are re-entering the academic setting.
Our quarter 2 and semester 1 of this school year are coming to a close, and teachers and students are working together to make sure that everyone's in good academic standing. We're setting aside a couple of days at the end of the semester to get it done, to make sure that everyone has what they need to be successful going into semester 2.
And to make sure our seniors are supported, the National Honor Society sponsored an alumni panel where past students met with NHS juniors and seniors. The NHS graduates talked about their college experiences and answered questions about the college application and financial aid processes, academic expectations, and must-haves for a college life.
And just a quick update on a minor schedule change that we've had since coming back from winter break. Due to an increase in COVID cases after the holidays, a 5th lunch wave has been added. There were previously 4. In an effort to reduce the amount of time that students are in close proximity while eating, and no academic time has been sacrificed for this change. So we're just doing that to stay safe.
And due to COVID, the middle and intermediate school liaisons have been unable to meet with their student leaders, but we hope to give updates on those schools in the next month's report.
Thank you both. We'll then move into our facility use report. Are there any questions on the facility use report? Seeing none, we'll move into our human resource report. Are there any questions on our human resources report? Seeing none, we'll move into the enrollment report. Are there any questions on the enrollment report? Seeing none, we'll move into the finance report. Are there any questions on the finance report? Seeing none, we'll move into the fire drill crisis code report. Any questions on that report? Seeing none, we'll move into the policy committee report. If Ms. Grant wants to provide a brief update.
Okay. The policy committee met. This is just the beginnings of planning for changes or additions, what have you, to the policy. We did first read, or we have first read for policy number 5700, which is the bullying prevention and intervention, and policy number 57008, the administrative regulations. The superintendent is going to be seeking answers to several questions that we had, discussing matters regarding communication of forms and staff training in regards to the administrative part of the school climate plan, which is embedded in the administrative regulations for bullying prevention. We also looked at policy number 5210, which is student dress. And we did get some input from one of the student organizations. And we're going to be pursuing getting more information from Principal Harris and student stakeholders. And the committee will meet again. This is just the beginning of looking into the student dress rules and regulations, making any changes. Also, we discussed on equity policy. We don't have one, and we are going to be putting one together. We'll also get input on that. And the committee will be submitting ideas to the superintendent in language. So right now, that's as far as we've gone. It's going to take a little while, but we're working on it.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. We'll then move into the curriculum committee report. Mr. Solozny.
Yes, good evening, everybody. The curriculum committee met last Thursday, and we discussed several modifications, removals, changes, and additions to courses for our program of studies. Thank you, Mr. Monti. That's exactly the word I was looking for. So I handed each one of you, I had, thank you to Francis for printing these out for us. Basically, I wanted to just give you guys a chance, an opportunity to talk about some of the modifications that we had, and also have a chance to ask Mr. Harris and Caroline any additional questions that you might have about these changes, additions, and removals. Do you want me to go into like a brief? Because I do.
Mr. Solozny.
Yes.
So the program of studies is on the agenda under new business.
Oh, so we're going to discuss it. That's right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so we'll discuss
Thanks, guys. Good looking out. All right, we'll talk about it then. To be continued. Does anybody have any questions about the curriculum committee right now? All right, then. Moving on.
Great. Thank you. That brings us to old business. Update on air purifiers for schools. Mr. Montini.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's an update, and there's an update to the update that's in there. So we purchased the NQ air purifiers after we secured a maintenance agreement that was that guaranteed the warranty, and which was much better financially, much better. So we continue to work with the company. We did that, and happy to say that now, as of today, all of our classroom spaces, regular classroom spaces, have an air purifier. And Salem is totally complete. And now they're going back and they're making the bigger air purifiers for the larger spaces. Like that one would be for a gymnasium or a large space. So the regular sort of classroom spaces, they've been equipped, and now they're doing the larger spaces. So that's been great.
Can I just ask one question? How does Genesis fit into the air purifier?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna have to defer. Mr. Bernardi, did we purchase any for Genesis?
We did not, but we can have that as a then purchase. They have plenty of stock.
Thank you. Yep, so,
Thank you. So that brings us into our policy revisions that were first reads at our last meeting. And there's a memo in there stating what the policies are, if you don't recall. So we'll go with policy 1331, prohibition against smoking. Can I have a motion to accept those policy revisions?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Brandt and a second by Mr. Solozzi. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? We'll then move on to, and that passes. We'll then move on to policy 4128, alcohol, tobacco, and drug-free workplace. Can I have a motion to approve BOE policy 4128 as revised?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Solozzi and a second by Ms. O'Donnell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That brings us to BOE policy 5220, drug and alcohol use by students. Can I have a motion to approve this policy as revised? We have a motion by Ms. Makowski and a second by Mr. McCool.
No, me.
Mr. Solozzi? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes and brings us to policy 5221, chemical health policy for student athletes. Can I have a motion to approve this policy as revised? We have a motion by Ms. O'Donnell
Second.
and a second by Mr. Solozzi. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. And lastly, that brings us to BOE policy 5113, student attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism, and administrative regulations and forms. Could I have a motion to approve that policy as revised?
So motioned.
We have a motion by Mr. McCool and a second by Ms. O'Donnell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That then brings us into new business, BOE policy 5700, bullying prevention and intervention, and BOE policy 5700R, administrative regulations, which is a first read. Do you have any comments, Mr. Martinez, that you'd like to add on it, or it's just kind of?
yeah, basically it is changes that were submitted by our attorneys in compliance with the change in law, which changes the definition of bullying. No longer has to be, it can be persistent, but it no longer has to be persistent. A single act, if it meets the criteria, can be. And to Mrs. Grant's point earlier, it also, the administrative regulations also make some changes. It calls for a student to be on the school climate at the high school level, school climate committee. And we have school climate committees. One of the questions of the policy committee is how is that communicated? So I will have the answers to the questions the policy committee provided to me by the time you vote, which essentially is how is it communicated? So we know the school climate coordinator is the building principal. The district climate coordinator is Assistant Superintendent Cooney. How is the team communicated out? We have a shared drive where we keep track of this information yearly. I suspect the principals communicated out via email annually, but I'll get a real answer for this committee. Also, one of the things in the policy, it calls for training materials to be posted after having collaborated with the state. So we are currently collaborating with the state. I actually have traded some emails because the training materials that we use require SDE consultation. And the initial information that I have both for the policy committee and this board is that the state said they were going to complete some things that they really haven't, so we are waiting on some information. But we're currently preparing those training materials, and we expect within the next month or so to have completed them and reviewed them with our administrators in time for passage of the policy. And lastly, we do not have updated bullying forms for you as part of the administrative regulations, as Mrs. Grant pointed out from the policy committee. We're going to review those at an upcoming administrative meeting. Since they use the forms so readily, I didn't want to propose it without getting input from the admin person. So we'll bring those to you as well.
And Mr. McCoy, you have a question?
Yeah, when reading these policies over, one of the additions just struck me as odd, and I could use some clarification.
Sure.
It talks about, like, and I'm just going to read it. For purpose of this policy, teen dating violence means any act of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, including stalking, harassment, and threatening that occurs between two students who are currently in or who have been recently in a dating relationship. And my questions were, does the law specifically call us to change policy to talk about whether someone was in or not in a relationship, to define whether or not they were being harassed or abused? Because I would think that we want to be very strict about that, whether they were in a relationship or not in a relationship.
So yes, the law does, and I can go ahead and get that law, pull out that verbiage. This came from the attorneys. If they're not in a relationship, then it's harassment. So we're taking care of it. It would just be guided by a harassment policy, not the teen dating violence. So the update basically is to into school climate plans and bullying is the addition of teen dating violence. So if they were not in a relationship, then it would be guided by our harassment policies.
Okay, so the legislator updated teen dating violence as a new category of harassment.
It was in court, yes. It was recently incorporated, not just brand new right now, in the last few years. So this law was actually passed 2 years ago that went into effect this year. But yeah, teen dating violence, I would say, is a newer term under the umbrella of this bullying safe school climate law. But either way you have it, we have rules and regulations that prohibit harassment of any kind. This is just a name-specific kind, to your point. But yes.
And there'd be discipline either way.
Yes, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the training that we were talking about actually involves the majority of the central office staff who are, for example, Mrs. Reichart would be the 504 and the 504 coordinator, the district school climate, Mr. Lawler being the Title IX coordinator. The harassment training that we're preparing now involves all of them. So it's sort of harassment, the harassment umbrella and all the different types and how we need to identify, react, hold accountable, restore, all of those things.
Thank you for the clarification.
And that brings us to a donation. Ms. Risk.
Okay, in accordance with BOE policy 3280, I present the following donation received by the Naugatuck School District. Chapter 11 of the Disabled American Veterans would like to donate $900 to the NHS ROTC program. May I have a motion to accept?
And I'll second.
We have a motion by Marilyn and a second by Aaron. Any discussion? Seeing none? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes, and we would like to thank the Chapter 11 of the American Disabled Veterans for your generous donation.
Thank you.
That brings us to the NHS Program of Studies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start us off with reviewing the memo, and I have a lot of curriculum experts over here to my left, and the policy chair over here to my right, if you folks want to chime in. Certainly, Mr. Slosey talked about the review of the program of studies. First, let me just set the context. Each year, this board approves the high school courses in January, so students can sign up for their courses in February. That's really important. That predates the budget process. So it very well could be that we approve a course that, let's say, doesn't make it through the budget process. Well, they still need to be able to register for these. In the event that that happens, then at least there's one class that would have to change one class, but it didn't prohibit the rest of the students from signing up for the other courses. So, you'll see in here that we're proposing as a continuation of last year based on a state mandate, a new health course. So that doesn't mean that we've incorporated into the budget yet. It means we're passing the course. I mean, this is a little tricky because it's a state mandated graduation requirement anyway. But just case in point, just because a course goes there, something could be cut as part of the budget process. I don't want you to think that you're automatically committing finances at this particular meeting unless we were committing resources to develop a curriculum. So that being said, the memo really spells out some additions and some subtractions. So last year, as part of the graduation requirements for the class of 2023, we began college and career readiness seminar, mastery-based portfolio. That's a slight modification to an existing course, but there's no, and there wouldn't be any budgetary impact. The Foundations of Art has not been very well attended. So Mr. Slosey, Mr. McCool were asking about enrollment. Basically, our 8th grade art classes cover all of the material for Foundations of Art. So they're going to collapse that offering and offer a different art class. And I believe it was going to be photography related, things that have a higher enrollment, more interest. There's a new course that has no budgetary impact. It would be a math elective, Explorations in Data Science. So the curriculum committee asked to review the curriculum. It's a free curriculum out of Stanford. They're taking a look at that now. And we would move forward piloting that in this particular class. This is an existing teacher that would offer this as an elective. So we'd be able to report out as we normally would a year from now, next year, at an update. What's the enrollment? Are kids liking it? How are kids faring, et cetera? Health 2. If you remember last year, we added through the budget process, we moved a 0.4 health teacher. We increased it by 0.6, or maybe it's the reverse. It was a 0.6 health teacher, and we increased it by 0.4 to make a 1.0. The class of 2023, for the longest time, Connecticut has been talking about increasing the graduation requirements. Whenever they increase graduation requirements, that comes, of course, with having to spend more money because you have to offer more classes. They put it off years and years and years and years, and then finally they decided to stick to their guns, and with the class of 2023, there was an increase in health and the mastery-based course. So we told you at last year's budget meeting that we'd be moving the 0.6 to a 1.0, and then next year we would need another 1.0 to satisfy the requirement so that everybody graduates with one full credit of health. So this, when we have our budget presentation, would be either an addition and or we'd be coming to you with ideas for the way in which we would fund it. For example, are we going to be able to fund it for a grant? Okay, so we don't have that prepared for you tonight, but we will at budget time. So one of the things that we are also doing is we are going to change from proposing that we change and drop the UConn ECE courses and move forward with the more, I guess I'll call it traditional, I don't know if it's traditional, but change to AP chemistry, AP biology, and AP physics. In general, those courses are more inclusive in the way in which they enroll. That unfortunately with UConn, while there were good courses, they were too selective and not inclusive of enough of our students. The next three courses As you know, we started talking about the increase in our multilingual learners, L students. We've had an increase. We'll talk to you more about this during our budget presentation. We developed a really great L handbook with the help and consultation of our new assistant principal at both Caroline and Ms. Stevens worked together on that. And part of that is the development of several, I'll call them English language proficiency courses that our existing L teachers are going to offer now. So there's no budgetary impact other than really small startup costs for materials that we're going to cover with grants or with our existing instructional account supply. And then lastly, not a part of the program of studies this year is child studies at NHS. At the curriculum committee, and Mr. Chair, curriculum chair, Mr. Scalzi, if you can, I tried to put this at the end. What we proposed to the curriculum committee was, was to do it the right way. We wouldn't want to bring back the course the same way that it left, right? So we want to modernize it, bring it to the, I don't know if we said 21st century. So our proposal is to bring to now, work from now until the next time in the program of studies and bring you a developed curriculum. We don't have a curriculum now, and to do it the right way. And our idea is to fold that into and align that with the teacher preparation, not Teach for America, that's TFA. Future Teachers of America, thank you, team course, where we are going to try to identify a way to co-teach with a preschool teacher, so that our kids would have experience in preschool, not just at that an inclusive preschool, so they would have experience. So that's what we want to develop and bring to you for next year. So I'm going to pause before I guess we should ask for the motion and then discussion.
So could I have a motion to approve the NHS program of studies for the 2022-2023 school year?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Grant. We have a second.
Second.
And a second by Ms. Makowski. Any discussion?
So while all of these, especially in the committee, got me to a yes or a maybe, I did not receive the link to go through the meat and potatoes of the curriculum that we talked about getting, so I could dig through it before this time.
Okay, what link were you, Mr. Poole, what link? The science one, the data
For
one?
both the explorations in data science for the math elective and the, there was another one.
The link to the health curriculum.
The health curriculum. Yeah.
We'll get those to you.
We'll get those to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The health curriculum, I thought we were having some of it done by post-college.
We were working with post-university. Some students work with post-university on that was in lieu of the, not health, but that was the childcare class. So when the childcare went, they took classes at post. That's not been as popular, and it's not as good as what we think we can create if we were actually to take one of our preschool classes, either create a new one and do it ourselves. So
I thought there was something about the health classes. I might be mistaken.
well, I don't usually like to doubt your memory because it's unlike I've ever seen, but I don't think so.
No,
Yeah.
I can be wrong.
Any other discussion?
And so, especially because the discussion was so vibrant, and I think I got to a very good place with all of these, I don't want to slow down this vote this time, but in the future, if I don't get a chance to dig through the things that I'd like to look at, I would bring a motion or amend the motion to table it until I can for future times.
Yeah,
At this time, I would be happy to let it pass.
completely understood, and I guess what I would say is that I would rather work something out where we approved it, and then we would make amend a motion to a particular course while we're waiting to approve that curricula, so it wouldn't hold the high school up. But thank you. And that course is not being implemented until next year, so we still have plenty of time to review the curricula and make changes.
Yep, no, that's what I'm comfortable, just letting it go tonight.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. That then brings us to the approval of the minutes. I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 9th, 2021 regular monthly Board of Ed meeting.
A motion to approve the minutes.
A motion by Mr. McCool. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Makowski. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That then brings us to communications. And our first one is Board of Education Appreciation Month. If you take a look in front of you, and also up here, if you want to look after the meeting, we have lots of cards that have been made for us by our elementary students. We want to thank them greatly for them. It is an honor, and preschool. It's an honor and a pleasure to serve on this Board of Education and to advocate for our families and our students and our community. It's an honor to serve with each and every one of you. And I thank you personally for all that you do.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just mimic your words and thank everyone for their service. We work hard in service of the students in teaching and learning. You give freely so much of your time. I love that the students did this and made this, and this was organic coming from our schools. We didn't ask them to do anything, and I thought this was great. So for all of you, virtual high fives in the day of physical distancing from a class over at the ECC. So that's wonderful. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, everyone. And any other communications?
I've got a few for you
Yes.
this evening. So there's a number of community events going on that I wanted to bring the attention to on Saturday, January 22nd, sponsored by the Naugatuck High School softball team. They'll be having a pasta dinner from 4 to 8 at 758 Rubber Ave in Naugatuck. $10 a person, and there are to-go orders available. So if you want to support Naugatuck High School softball, that's a great event. Naugatuck basketball is registration's now open. So if you want to jump in and play on Naugatuck basketball, there's information about that all over social media right now. The Peter J. Foley Little League signups have also started in our town, and registration is open for that as well. And lastly, I just wanted to add, while we didn't have an agenda item this week to talk about COVID restrictions, you noted last time we spoke that you would put something together, and we have not yet done a workshop, and I've reached out to every board member, an email. I've showed some of you guys policy I've started to put together and asked some of you to comment on, and except for the in-person times that I've gotten some feedback from Mr. Lucky and Mr. Solosi and Ms. Makowski, no one else has given me any feedback, and we continue to hear from parents in this community that we have a problem. I've directed parents to Mr. Montini, who feel like they have children falling through the cracks of our lack of policy, and I implore the board again to come together and work together to find a policy and guidance that works for all of Naugatuck and not some of Naugatuck.
Thank you. Any other board communications? Seeing none, that brings us to adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Marilyn and a second by Diana. All those in favor? Aye. And we are adjourned at 8:01.